They arrived in the small coastal town late in the evening, tired from travel and still a little stunned by the fact that they were finally married. The hotel room smelled of clean sheets and sea air, and the balcony doors were open just enough to let the sound of waves slip inside. She kicked off her shoes and laughed, a soft, relieved laugh, the kind that comes when the pressure of the wedding day finally releases its grip. He watched her for a moment, realizing how different she looked now, not because of a ring or a dress, but because she seemed lighter, more herself. They poured 2 glasses of wine, sat on the edge of the bed, and talked about nothing important at all. How strange it felt to wake up tomorrow as husband and wife, how hungry they suddenly were, how quiet the world seemed when no one expected anything from them. The next morning started slowly, bodies still warm and tangled, sunlight creeping across the room. There was no rush to get up, no schedule to follow. They stayed in bed longer than usual, talking in low voices, sharing thoughts that felt more honest in the half-awake state. She traced lazy circles on his chest while he teased her about how she stole the blankets in her sleep. The closeness felt deeper than desire, but desire was there too, calm and confident, no longer nervous or uncertain. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about enjoying each other without holding back. When they finally got dressed, it felt like they were leaving a private world behind just to step into another one together. They spent the day wandering through narrow streets, stopping for coffee, sharing desserts with 2 spoons, brushing hands without thinking. At lunch, they sat close, knees touching under the table, exchanging looks that made them smile for no reason. She told him how strange it felt to call him her husband, how the word sounded heavy but comforting at the same time. He admitted that it scared him a little too, not because of doubt, but because of how much he cared. That honesty lingered between them, turning simple moments into something intimate. Even walking back to the hotel felt charged, as if every glance carried a promise. That evening, after a long shower and a slow dinner on the balcony, the air between them shifted again. The conversation softened, words giving way to touches that were familiar yet new. There was laughter mixed with quiet intensity, teasing mixed with tenderness. Nothing felt rushed or forced. The intimacy grew naturally, fueled by trust more than passion, though passion was never far away. Later, lying side by side, listening to the sea, she rested her head on his shoulder and said that this was what she hoped marriage would feel like: safe, exciting, and a little wild in the best way. He kissed her hair and told her that the wedding was just one day, but these moments they were building now were the real beginning. As the days passed, the honeymoon became less about the place and more about the rhythm they were creating together. Mornings filled with slow kisses and shared showers, afternoons with adventures and small disagreements that ended in laughter, nights with long talks and closeness that felt earned, not dramatic. They learned new sides of each other. How one needed silence after a busy day, how the other craved conversation before sleep. None of it felt threatening, felt real. By the time they packed their bags to leave, they both knew that the journey hadn't been an escape from real life. It was a soft, honest introduction to it, together. When they returned from the trip, real life waited for them exactly where they had left it, with unpacked boxes, work emails, and routines that didn't pause just because love felt big. Yet something was different now. Their apartment felt smaller but warmer, filled with quiet jokes, shared glances, and an ease they hadn't known before. Mornings became a slow dance of coffee cups and sleepy smiles. Evenings a mix of conversations about nothing and everything at once. Sometimes they argued over small things, whose turn it was to cook, why one of them always forgot to buy milk. But even those moments ended differently now, softer, quicker, wrapped in the understanding that they were on the same side. The honeymoon hadn't faded. It had simply changed shape. At night, when the world finally went quiet, they found new ways to stay close. Not every evening was filled with passion, but every evening carried intimacy. Sometimes it was a long talk in the dark, bodies close, voices low, sharing fears they hadn't known how to name before. Other nights it was playful teasing that turned into laughter and warmth, a reminder that desire didn't need grand gestures to stay alive. She liked how he still reached for her without thinking, how his hand rested naturally on her back as if it belonged there. He loved how she trusted him enough to be vulnerable, to be messy, to be real. These moments didn't feel dramatic, but they felt deep, and depth, they learned, was far more powerful. As weeks passed, they began to understand marriage not as a promise of perfection, but as a choice repeated daily. There were days when stress crept in, when exhaustion dulled their patience, when silence felt heavier than comfort. But even then, they came back to each other. A touch on the arm, a shared meal, a quiet apology spoken without pride. They discovered that love wasn't always loud or romantic. Sometimes it was simply staying, listening, and choosing to try again. And in those choices, desire didn't disappear. It matured, rooted itself in trust, respect, and familiarity that made closeness even more meaningful. One evening, sitting together on the couch, her legs resting over his, she realized that this was the kind of happiness no one posted about. It didn't need filters or perfect timing. It lived in ordinary moments: folded laundry, late-night snacks, whispered jokes before sleep. He felt it too, that calm certainty that this was not the end of a story, but the steady middle of one worth living. Their honeymoon had taught them how to enjoy each other, but this life they were building now taught them how to love. And as they turned off the lights and moved closer, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, not chasing excitement, but creating it quietly, one shared day at a time.